It's time for our theme of the week. Music hall. Music hall. And we're joined by our expert, who is Oliver Double, reader of comic and popular performance at the University of Kent.
Absolutely.
Full disclosure, I know you and so does Kiri.
Yeah.
We're sort of friends.
I think we have a very strange connection, though.
Oh?
So, yeah, you were my... Well, you explain how we know each other.
You didn't foster
Kiri,
him, did you?
No.
No.
This is my eldest.
Yeah, that's right. They grow up so quickly. So Kiri used to teach stand-up, but there used to be a comedy course at University of Salford, and I was the external examiner. So I saw her feedback to her students, and it was amazing. It was so good.
Well,
it
that's
was
a relief.
incredibly supportive, detailed, and individualised. It was.
So you would go in, and what were you looking for? I mean, isn't it as simple as, how funny are you, or...
No, because it's not, is it? It's more, you can see someone having, we all know we can see a bad comedian having a good gig, and we can see a good comedian having a bad gig. And you'd mark them on things like how ambitious they were with their material. Had they used things like their voice, movement? Did it feel like the first punchline? Had they pushed it past that?
Oh.
So there's lots of feedback you can give, I think.
Okay.
And I think there was really specific stuff about like this gag would work well in this gig, but not if you tried it here, it just wouldn't work, that kind of thing, which is actually like way beyond what somebody who's starting out would normally be able to access that knowledge. It was great.
Good. Now,
Yeah, I recognise that we were going down a cul-de-sac, but I couldn't stop driving.
You put all that behind you for today to talk about musical. Now, I have a love of the idea of musical, but I'm not sure I know much about the specifics of it. What is music hall?
So music hall was a popular entertainment form that started in the mid-19th century, and it was sort of the predominant form of popular entertainment right through to really the 1950s, and it's sort of staggered on into the early 60s.
Right. So what did we have before music hall then?
Well, before music hall, there were a bunch of different things.
We had Mrs. Brown's Boys.
Mrs. Brown's Boys, exactly. Well, funnily enough, there were some very crude and bawdy shows called Song and Supper Rooms, where they had genuinely naughty lyrics. I've got a book here, Bawdy Songs of the Early Music Hall.
Brilliant,
right? And,
brilliant.
Okay, if I just get my glasses out, I can read you a sample lyric. Oh, how I love to ride my hot, my wheedling, coaxing bride.
Wow.
Goodness me.
Pretty on the nose.
Yeah. And the bride presumably isn't the name of the horse.
No, and also what's quite interesting about the songs is it's not just about male sexual pleasure either. It's like the women like it as much as the men in those songs.
Well, let's hear one of those.
You're a feminist. I love that.
Absolutely. So it's the mid-19th century.
Yeah, so what starts to happen is that you have these song clubs where people sing songs, right? And they sit around a table and they take it in turns. There's a chairman who sort of calls them up to sing. And they would, take it in turns. And apparently they could be quite rough. If people didn't like it, they would throw stuff.
So there was an audience.
Well, what started to happen was instead of just being the singers, people would come along to watch. And then eventually it changes so that people are actually on a little stage and it's much more like a kind of show. But initially, audiences sat around tables eating and drinking.
In a pub?
Well, yeah, initially in a pub. And then in the 1850s, you start to get purpose-built music halls. So the first one was the Canterbury Music Hall.
Oh, in Canterbury?
Not in Canterbury, in London, strangely.
Right.
They were playing a trick with the name of that. And there was a guy called Charles Morton started it. And then they gradually, as it became more popular, very, very quickly, you start to get hundreds of these things around London and then around the rest of the UK. And as it starts to grow, the theatres gradually change shape. So Wilton's in London would be an example of one from the 1870s. And not many of those buildings survived. And then examples of ones later than that would include the Hackney Empire, opened in 1901, and the London Palladium, which opened in 1910.
Right, but yeah, I mean, have you played Wilton's, Kiri?
No, I haven't. I played the others. Is it kind of Frank Matchamy theatres?
Yeah, absolutely. Frank Matcham was one of the
but
architects.
not Wilton's, though, was it? Wilton's isn't Frank Matcham. No. I mean, Wilton's is a very odd thing. I mean, isn't it like the last music hall?
Yeah, of that
era.
Yeah, that's right.
Because actually it's like a terraced house, isn't it? I think he bought 2 terrace houses, knocked them together and then extended out the back. It's you should go. It's really good. Anyone actually who hasn't been to Wilton's, it's worth a visit.
Yeah, I saw Roy Hudd in pantomime there, and it was superb.
Oh. Well, wasn't he the president of the musical?
He was president of the British Music Hall Society, and can I just say, join that if you're interested. It's so good, and if all you need to do is go to the British Music Hall Society website, and it'll tell you all about how to join.
Yeah, well, I had a rather unfortunate association with the British Musical Society, or an event that happened. I knew Roy a bit.
Yeah,
and he was great fun. And he was giving. I had this old warm-up man called Bobby Bragg. You know Matt Bragg?
Yeah.
His dad. So Bobby Bragg used to do all the warm-ups for TV Burke. And I knew he was a friend of Roy's, and I said I'd love to meet Roy. So we went out for. But Bobby was very ill. He got very ill. And anyway, the 3 of us went out. And I said to Roy, I said, "Oh, by the way, Roy, this is on me." He goes, "Oh," he goes, "I'm a diabetic and he's got cancer, so it's going to be a cheap bill." Anyway, he said, "Oh, will you come along and present Bobby with this award from the Musical Society?" So I go there. And I've been to some like the comedy heritage things. I've been to those. Have you been to those?
No.
They're quite old. People there are quite old, but the British Musical Society, they're old. I mean, they're really, really. Oh, I mean, there's a lot of.
I think they're looking for younger members. Actually, I have to say.
Right, so I go on, and we're on like a raised thing. There's a table there. It's me, Roy, Bobby, and then there's some other kind of dignitaries all really old. And I go on and I say, "Well, thank you." He hands over to me, and I go, "It's great to be here at the." Dignitas reunion dinner. Nothing. Okay, and then I carry on a bit, and then the bloke on the end fell off.
Oh,
fell off the stage, and everyone goes. And then I'm like, "What do I do? Carry on?" No one moved, and in the end, someone got up and sort of helped him back up. But it was like really, I mean, wow, really, yeah. So that's my experience.
It's
with
not
them. But I'm
better
sure
than
it's
that.
a great. Yes, I'm sure it's. I mean, I as a kid, I used to love watching that. The Good Old Days.
The Good Old Days, indeed. Yeah,
Leeds City Varieties.
Leeds City Varieties, exactly.
Oh, I love that place.
So it was. I mean, what you could think of music hall as a precursor to both stand-up comedy and pop music, but kind of joined, because in the kind of classic sort of Victorian music hall, there were lots of different types of acts. You could get performing elephants, anything, but the main type of act would be a comedy singer, and they'd be known as a comedian, and they would do a song. So you'd probably know some music hall songs. Oh, I Do Like to Be Beside the Seaside. That's a music hall song by Mark Sheridan. Or Down at the Old Bull and Bush, that was Florrie Ford. And so a lot of these songs we've remembered. In fact, the reverses to Do Like to Be Beside the Seaside, nobody knows. The bit we know is just the chorus.
Right.
And
yeah, a lot of them are like that, aren't they?
Yeah.
My nan used to sing one, which I always really loved, called Oh Antonio. Do you know that?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah.
I think there's that Mary Lloyd, or
I think that might be Florrie Ford as well.
Florrie Ford, yeah. Oh Antonio, he's gone away, left me on my own, all on my own. I'd like to see him and his new sweetheart, because off would go Antonio and his ice cream cart. He's an ice cream man.
Yeah, and I think I'm right in saying that up would go Antonio, because I think she's turning his cart over in revenge for him.
Oh, there's that
going off with somebody. I think so.
Yes, yeah. And so, who were some of the comedians that we've?
Well, there was a comedian called Little Titch. I've got on my shirt.
Oh yeah.
So Little Titch was from Kent. He was from Cudham. And he was a very small person, and he had an extra finger on each hand.
Wow.
Which he's very self-conscious about.
That's a head start right there.
Well, yeah, he was very self-conscious about it. If you see photos of him, he's often got his hands hidden.
Yeah.
But
another pair of mittens for Mr. Titch.
Yeah, indeed. Mittens would have been the ideal handwear. But yeah, he
always thinking about the merch. I like that.
Yeah, indeed. Well, you could get a little wind-up Little Titch. You could get a little kind of wind-up model, and it would do because he was famous for this big boot dance where he would have these long boots, and he would sort of tap dance on them, and he could sort of lean unlikely angles.
Yeah, it was the length of the feet, wasn't it?
That's right.
Have you seen
No.
pictures? Oh, yeah.
There's a famous film of it made in 1900 where he does this dance, and it's just amazing.
Because he goes up on them.
He goes up on them like stilts, and it's probably very dangerous and quite painful to do. But he's where we get the word titch from.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was named after a famous sort of Victorian con man who was the Titchborn claimant, who claimed to be the long-lost son of this rich Victorian family, even though he didn't look nothing like this guy. And famously, the Titchborn claimant was a large man. So he called himself, when he started off, Little Titch, because it was quite funny, the idea of him being Little Titch. And it went originally Little Titchborn, goes down to Little Titch. And then within his own lifetime, he'd given a word to the English language. That's how popular he was.
The bits I know of music hall, which isn't a lot, but when I've had it sort of portrayed to me is that it was an area where actually women were well represented and sort of doyens.
I'm so glad you raised that. Yeah, so Mari Lloyd was one of the biggest comedians of the music hall, and very, very saucy. My Old Man Said Follow the Van, that was one of hers. And the songs are always full of innuendo, and she's always kind of comes out on top. And then later in life,
was that innuendo?
Yeah, that's very good. Towards the end of her life, she had a song called I'm One of the Ruins That Cromwell Knocked About a Bit, and it fitted the fact that she'd become middle-aged, like she had to change her persona in a way.
Right.
Wow.
And when she died, like thousands of people lined the streets of London to say their final farewell to her. But another great woman from the music hall was Vesta Tilley, who was a male impersonator. And she was so popular that she influenced male fashions. Men would go along and check out her trousers or whatever. And she appeared at the first ever Royal Variety Show in 1912. And apparently the idea of a woman in trousers was so shocking to Queen Mary that she hid her face behind her programme.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, and that was tough because in the Royal Variety Show, right into the mid-20th century, apparently it was a really tough audience because they...
Listen up.
I was going to say...
1997, It wasn't easy.
All right, but did they do this? Because apparently this is what they used to do. They'd watch the Royal Box and only laugh if they laughed.
Well, I did it. I mean, against my better judgment. Really. I was on with the Spice Girls.
Wow.
What a double bill.
Did you do a number with them?
I wasn't on with them.
That would have been great. If you had got on with them, which song would you have done?
I probably would have done... Do you like to be beside the seaside? No, but I did. So I was on with the Spice Girls, Jim Davidson. This dates us. Yeah, Jim Davidson. What's his face? Brian Conley.
Oh yeah.
And Michael Bolton, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, and I went on. It was really tough, and you were very aware of the Queen up there in the. It was the Queen. I come off, and as I go off, I walk past. Des O'Connor was hosting. I walked past Jim Davidson, and I said, "How did it look?" And he goes, "It looked fine."
Oh no! Oh no!
Oh.
Yeah, it was like cold sweat job. So these are like...
Actually, can I just tell you about another woman? There was an amazing woman called Nellie Wallace, and she played a kind of old maid type. So she plays a kind of woman who looks grotesque, but she's always interested in romantic adventures with men. Right, that's the basic comedy. And there's a live recording of her from late in her career, and it's quite rare to have recordings of these people with an audience, and she's really funny.
Oh, really?
And she does, one of the things they would do is, and Dan Leno pioneered this style, is that the song becomes less important. The song is just a little bit at the beginning, and then you stop and you do like 3 minutes of gags, and then you do the end chorus. So she does one of those, and she does this whole thing about how her father was ill in bed or something, and they recommended a trip to the seaside, but they couldn't afford it. So he stayed in bed, and they fanned him with a kipper. Right.
Right.
I see. I think that's the same basic comedic DNA as you've got.
Yeah, possibly. Although I wouldn't open with it.
Yeah. It killed in 1948, I'll tell you that.
Well, see, Dan Leno's a name that comes up a lot, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
Roy Hardwood will be going Dan Leno.
Well, he was known as the funniest man on earth.
But do we have any, is there any recordings
Yeah.
or any scripts or?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, a bit like pop, when we were young, pop, you'd buy a single. Well, you would do then was buy a song sheet. So there are lots of song sheets of Dan Leno songs, so they have the patter written into them as well.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, but there are also quite a lot of recordings. There's enough for an album of recordings that would have been released on 78.
Wow.
And he was identified by somebody who worked with him as being the person who did the most to sort of shift the centre of gravity from song to patter. So you could argue that he's one of the progenitors of stand-up comedy. And but what's really tricky is because he died in the very early years of the 20th century, so it wasn't possible to record him with an audience. So it's kind of sounds weird because you hear this very crackly recording of somebody saying these really weird old jokes and no response. And he himself, because at that point you couldn't record like with one of these, you couldn't record electronically. It was like a mechanical process. So basically you had to put your face into a funnel. And he said, how the hell can I be funny into a funnel? Which is a fair question.
Yeah, yeah. And so then what, so if you say it ended in the sort of 50s.
Yeah, so it changed quite a lot in the early years of the 20th century. And one of the reasons was because the licensing laws changed. And what that meant was that you couldn't serve alcohol within the auditorium in most cases. So that meant that the wet money, as they called it, the money that came from drink sales, massively descended, right? So,
I know that phrase. I used to work in a comedy club, and the wet spend.
Is that what they call it?
Wet spend is nice.
Thrown around, and it made me feel ill every time anyone said it.
So what they did was, instead of having a show that in the Victorian era, the shows would be long, and they would advertise when each act was on, because people wouldn't necessarily go for the whole night. They would go to see this person or that person. But then they changed it because they needed to make more money on the ticket sales. So they changed from being these one long show to twice nightly. So they would do the same show twice night for 6 nights, so 12 shows in a week. And it maximised the money that could be taken on the door. But also, around the same time, it started to move from it being just these comic singers being the vast majority of the acts to being more of a mixed bill. So you'd get dancers and performing animals and magicians and ventriloquists and speciality acts, some of which were very weird. So I wrote this book, Britain Had Talent, about variety. And I've got
Well, what's the difference between variety and
they're really
musical?
kind of it really marks, I mean, they're both, the terms, it's complicated because the terms are interchangeable really, but normally when you say music hall you mean the early tradition, and once it goes to twice nightly people normally talk about variety, but both terms were used really throughout the history.
It strikes me then with those sort of speciality acts. To me, it sounds a bit more like when I hear people talking about the start of alternative comedy, and there are lots of sort of almost circusy acts, like the guy with the block of ice and stuff like that.
Yeah, the Iceman. So I mean, I've also sort of written about that era as well. And what happened, one of the kind of influences on that was street performers, and they brought a lot of that stuff into it, like, comedy escapologists and things. They would be hung upside down and everything would fall out their pockets, that kind of thing. But there was an act called Henry Vadden, whose act was he wore a helmet with a spike on, and they would drop a massive wooden cartwheel and it would fall onto the spike and then he would spin it round.
Right. And presumably there was some build-up to this, because that's only...
Yeah, but also, absolutely, but also imagine doing that for 12 times a week.
Yeah.
You'd be shorter at the end of the week than at the beginning.
Well, remember Bob Blackman? Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah, used to smash the tray on his head.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Mule Train.
Yeah.
Jimmy Tarbuck, name drop, told me a story about him, right? He's on tour with... stop me if I've told you this, but he's on tour with Bob Blackman, and Bob says, so every night he'd just come out doing Mule Train, hit himself over the... He says to Jimmy, I've got a new bit tonight. He says, will you stand in the wings and watch? So Jimmy stands in the wings, and he comes on, does Mule Train, smashes himself over the head with the tray. And then the last one, he leans into the audience and smashes over the head of someone in the front row, who gets up and punches him in the face. So what killed it off?
Well,
Telly.
So, yeah, that was a huge factor. I think there were a bunch of different things. I think one thing was that there was demographic shift. So the kind of population, the Glasgow Empire was one of the most famous or infamous, known as the graveyard of English comics. Particularly if you were there second house on a Friday night when people had been at work for the week and then been out to the pub and had a few inside them, hated the English. They just, I mean, there's a kind of famously fake to faint to avoid facing the audience at the Glasgow Empire. But the point is, the Glasgow Empire was in Sauchiehall Street in central Glasgow. And so all the people who lived in central Glasgow in working class communities, so once Glasgow was being developed and they started moving those people out to the new towns, the sort of satellite towns of Glasgow, suddenly people can't get to it, can't get home afterwards. So that was a huge thing. Also, kind of real estate prices in town centres were going up, so it was worth selling the theatres off. The telly was a huge thing, because if you could see, when ITV launched in 1955, one of the big flagship shows, compared by Tommy Trinder, was Sunday night at the London Palladium. Well, if you could see the best variety acts in the world for free on your telly on a Sunday night, why do you want to go to the Leeds Empire and see a much lesser bill for money, where the theatre's peeling a bit and the acts aren't quite as good? So, it was a bunch of factors, really. But it disappeared. It'd been around for a century and it disappeared within about a period of 10 years.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
But in a way, like the alternative cabaret thing mirrors that, doesn't it? Because it starts in pubs and...
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that helped alternative comedy to spread in the 80s was Cast New Variety.
Yeah.
It was a sort of left-wing theatre company that sort of repurposed itself as a promoter of this new entertainment, and it was called New Variety, consciously.
And they ran the Hackney Empire.
Yeah, they brought the Hackney Empire back as a theatre, because it shut down in the 50s. It was initially a TV studio and then a bingo hall for years and years. And this bunch of trots, this amazing bunch of eccentrics, they managed to bring it back. It's a fantastic achievement.
Wow.
Great. Well, look, thanks so much, Oliver. Now, do you want to plug those books again?
I absolutely do. Look at this.
Look at that.
You can't argue with it.
Britain Had Talent.
Britain Had Talent.
That looks really good. We can get that. And what was the other one you said?
Well, there's this Bawdy Songs of the Early Music Hall.
I'd like to borrow that.
Yeah.
Super. Anything?
So how do I explain this? So my 9, so that's my Welsh, my grandma.
Yeah.
Had lots of brothers and sisters, and one of the sisters was in music hall and was a comedian.
Wow.
But died in her 20s of TB. So that's because people always go, oh, where's it from? And then suddenly a relative mentioned, oh, well, of course your 9th sister was a comedian at the time.
Well, one of the things is, I mean, the people who were the big stars made enormous amounts of money, but there were a lot of people who were not big stars who were really exploited. And in fact, in 1907, there was what's called the Music Hall War. It was a strike. And there's one of the theories about why Mari Lloyd was one of the only big stars who wasn't invited to be in that first Royal Variety performance in 1912 was because she'd been so active in that strike.
Really?
John Major's dad was also active in that strike.
Really?
Yeah, because he was a music hall comedian. Yeah.
That's mad. It's amazing. But I love it because one of the reasons when I'm on stage, I always wear sequins and I always dress up. And part of it is trying to do a head nod to that kind of world, and I love playing those venues.
There's quite a funny thing that they really looked after their costumes, and famously there was a booker for Moss Empires, one of the big chains, Cissy Williams, who wouldn't book an act if they had dirty shoes, right? But there's a thing that they wouldn't, if you're wearing it like a suit, if that was your thing, that you wouldn't sit down in that. Never sit down in the props. You take them off in the break.
Wow.
Wear a dressing gown or something.
That was the funny thing of that Royal Variety. So I'm in the same dressing room as I had this, there was a kind of ventriloquist bloke with a bird, and there's the Russian strongman, and there was, Brian Connolly, because there's not enough. And all those acts, all the acts from sort of the generation before me, they all had dress shoes.
Yes. Yeah,
patent leather dress shoes.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Can I tell you about a strong woman?
Hannah?
No. Her name was Joan Rhodes, and I interviewed her. She was 89 years old, and she was fantastic. Her act, she wears like a spangly basque and fishnets and massive heels and like blonde and, incredibly glam. And she comes out onto a song called Sweet and Lovely. And everybody thinks this is going to be a stripper, but no, she challenges men in the audience to feats of strength and defeats them in, tug of war, like 2 or 3 men on each arm. And
Brilliant.
she tears a London phone book in half and she bends a steel bar around her knee or her neck. And she was a remarkable person. She also beat me at Scrabble after the interview.
But that's another story. Thanks so much, Oliver. Really good to talk to you.
So good, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That was our theme of the week.